My mother's failed assassination of the king landed her in prison. In the throne room, my father and I awaited our fate, expecting execution for treason. But the king's gaze, hot and avaricious, settled on my father. He gave him an ultimatum: enter the royal court as his companion, or watch his wife and son be tortured to death. My father yielded, and so the world turned upside down. My father, Elias, became the king's gilded captive, sequestered in the rosewood wing. I was cast into the east wing, a designated plaything for the crown prince, Alexander. The east wing was a monument to decadent indolence. Light bled from crystal chandeliers, cashmere throws were draped over every surface, and the air was always kept at a perfect, spring-like temperature. Prince Alexander, a boy my own age with features so fine they seemed chiseled from porcelain, had been warped by this palace into a creature of capricious cruelty. When I first saw him, he was lounging on a sleek leather sofa, swirling a glass of amber liquid as he watched a flock of elegant white peacocks strut across the manicured lawn. I knelt as protocol dictated, my knees barely touching the cold marble before a rough hand hauled me up and dragged me before him. He told me I was in luck. He had been looking for a drinking partner. He gripped my jaw, forcing my head back, while his other hand brought a heavy decanter to my lips, pouring raw whiskey down my throat. I choked, tears streaming from my eyes. He leaned in close, his voice a horrifying mix of childish innocence and calculated malice. He remarked on what a remarkable man my father must be to have captured the attention of his notoriously discerning father, enough for him to commit the unprecedented act of seizing a nobleman's husband. His fingertips traced a path from my chin down to my throat. His tone hardened as he asked if I had learned the same tricks, if I had come here with the intent to seduce him. I shook my head, trembling. He smiled, his fingers playing over the pulse in my neck. What a beautiful neck, he mused aloud. A shame it would have to be broken. And primal terror seized me and I cried out for my father. Alexander's hand clamped over my mouth instantly. He mockingly chastised me for making a scene, explaining that he was referring to the noisy peacock in the garden. At his signal, a guard stepped forward, and with a single brutal motion, snapped the neck of one of the birds. A spray of crimson splattered across its white plumage, a shocking stain that reminded me of the hidden bruises that sometimes colored my father's skin. At a state dinner, I saw my father again. The air was thick with the sound of string music and the sight of dancers weaving through the hall. He was seated beside the king, dressed in a formal, restrictive suit that made his once proud posture seem rigid and fragile, like a marble statue positioned against its will. His eyes were downcast, devoid of life. The king's hand never left the small of his back, occasionally dipping lower, causing a barely perceptible tremor to run through my father's body. The king's voice, though not loud, suddenly cut through the din of the banquet, silencing the room. He questioned why Elias wasn't smiling. He tilted my father's chin up, forcing him to meet the curious, pitying stares of the entire court, and asked if the evening's entertainment was not to his liking. A single tear escaped the corner of my father's eye. My hands clenched into fists inside my sleeves. I nearly surged forward, but Alexander's grip on my wrist was like a steel manacle. His cold that any move I made would only deepen my father's humiliation froze me in place. From across the hall, my father's gaze met mine for a fleeting second. Then, he turned to the king and stretched his lips into a smile that was more painful than any grimace. The king was not satisfied, telling him it was a poor attempt. His fingers brushed over Elias's lips as he commanded him to try again. He suggested that perhaps the crowd was making him shy. Then, to the shock of the entire court, The king stood, swept my father into his arms, and carried him towards a private antechamber behind the main hall. Through the translucent screen doors, I saw my father's silhouette being laid onto a divan. The king's voice was clear and sharp, a command for Elias to laugh for him. The sound of my father's suppressed, broken laughter followed, each note a needle piercing my ears. In that moment, I despised my father for his weakness, for what I saw as a complete lack of spine. A wicked fire ignited in my chest. After the dinner, I stormed up to Alexander, my back straight with desperate pride. I begged him to kill me and to release my mother. He seemed to find this highly amusing. He gestured towards his younger brother, Prince Edward, who was standing nearby. He told me, with a sinister glint in his eye, that if I were to beat Edward to death, he would see what he could do about reuniting my family. At the time, I didn't know that Edward was the king's favored son and a significant threat to Alexander's succession. Blinded by fury and despair, I lunged at him like a cornered animal. Edward, who was recovering from an illness, was no match for my crazed assault. Alexander's guards held back anyone who might have intervened. I don't know how long it lasted, but it ended with the sickening crack of breaking bone. I had crippled the second prince. As I wished, I was brought before the king and then thrown into the sunless dungeons of Blackwater prison. The cell was damp and cold, infested with vermin, yet a twisted sense of accomplishment washed over me. I felt I had finally done something decisive. But my father would not let me die. I learned later that he knelt outside the king's chambers, begging for my life, paying a price I could not imagine to secure a royal pardon. This only deepened my resentment. I hated him for saving me through such a degrading sacrifice. At the royal hunting preserve, amidst the fluttering banners and the crisp autumn air, I deliberately avoided Elias. When the king pulled him onto his horse to ride with him, the whispers started again. Men murmured about a man who would willingly become the king's creature, abandoning all dignity for power and comfort. The words were like acid in my ears, covered them and ran. Elias dismounted and hurried after me, but I screamed at him to get away. The look in his eyes shattered, as if struck by an invisible blow. I didn't dare look longer and kept running. Alexander caught up to me in a few long strides. A sharp slap across my face made my ears ring. Then, the hiss of his riding crop cutting through the air was followed by a searing pain across my back that sent me sprawling to the ground. I twisted around, demanding to know why he was interfering. He laughed, pulling me up from the dirt and holding me in an iron grip. His voice was a low, intense rumble in my ear. He told me that his name was Julian, and he was standing right behind me. He warned me never to run. His presence was so menacing that I could only nod, my neck stiff with fear. He then dragged me back to the tents like a misbehaving pet and shoved me toward my father. Elias saw the red mark on my cheek, and his own fingertips trembled with a mixture of sorrow and rage. He rarely spoke to Alexander, but now he shot him a look of pure hatred. I wanted to tell him what happened, but one glance at Alexander's predatory stare lodged the words in my throat. I just mumbled for my father to make him leave. Alexander, however, informed me that he had ears and that I should speak to him directly instead of crying to my parents like a child who hadn't been weaned. Then he turned and strode away. Elias tended to my wounds, speaking to me in a soft, gentle voice, but I was too full of resentment to answer, keeping my lips pressed into a thin line. He could only sigh my name, a breath full of sorrow. It wasn't until I was being punished for insubordination to the king, forced to stand watch outside the palace gates in the freezing cold, that things changed. Elias came for me again. He held my collapsing body, his voice choked with emotion. He whispered that if it weren't for me, he would not have found the will to live this long. Looking at him, I suddenly remembered being a small boy, being cornered by bullies. My father, a man of letters and quiet disposition, had launched himself at them with a desperate ferocity, fighting until he was covered in bruises but refusing to back down. My father wasn't without courage. He was simply terrified of losing me. I began to understand that all his endurance, all his humiliation, was tethered to me. "Father," I sobbed, clinging to him. It was then that news of Prince Edward's permanent disability reached us. Hearing it, I felt a wave of guilt and confusion. Alexander, however, seemed pleased. He called me his little champion. He presented me with a coat of pristine white cashmere, its texture impossibly soft. He told me to take off my old, worn jacket. I did as he said, unbuttoning the simple garment and letting it fall to the floor. "Keep going," he commanded, sinking back into a large, ornate armchair. He rested his chin on his hand, his eyes raking over my body as I removed my shirt, leaving me in my thin undershirt. The candlelight flickered, illuminating the hunger in his eyes. It was the same look the king gave my father. The realization struck me with the force of a physical blow, and I froze, my hands clenching at my sides. He let out a low, throaty chuckle. "Coward," he called me. I moistened my dry lips and heard myself say that I didn't want the coat anymore. He raised an eyebrow, intrigued, as if he had discovered a new and fascinating toy. He slowly rose to his feet, musing that the coward had found some courage. He took a step closer, his tall frame eclipsing me, casting me in shadow. He asked if I would prefer him to do it himself. Before I could answer, his fingers deftly undid the last button of my undershirt. The cool air on my bare skin made me shiver. Once the fabric was gone, he picked up the white cashmere coat and draped it around me from behind, enveloping me in its softness. His hot lips pressed against my ear as his arms wrapped around my waist like steel bands. He murmured that it was much more comfortable for him to hold me this way. Without another word, he pulled me down with him onto the sprawling bed behind us. I was trapped between his searing chest and the cool fabric of the coat, too afraid to move. His steady breath washed over my neck, warm and dangerously intimate, fraying my nerves with agonizing slowness. I was just another captured bird, awaiting the fall of an unpredictable blade. Late into the night, I tried to shift my numb body, desperate for a sliver of space. The arm around my waist tightened, threatening to crack my ribs. "Don't move," he whispered. I went completely still, staring with wide eyes at the intricate patterns on the canopy above, waiting for a dawn that felt impossibly far away. I stopped avoiding my father, but now he began to avoid me. I went to the rosewood wing many times, only to be told he wouldn't see me. I knew he was ashamed to face me. The king's cruelty towards him had escalated. One time, I forced my way in and found him with his wrists bound by silk cords, a piece of jade gagging him. He couldn't speak, but he shook his head frantically, his eyes filled with a bottomless ocean of shame and pain, silently begging me not to look. I had been there when the king was present before. I would stand outside the door, listening to my father's muffled, pained whimpers and the king's low-voiced questions and commands. Once I made a sound and alerted the king. In his displeasure, he sentenced me to kneel on the stone courtyard outside. I knelt for half the day, my legs going from pins and needles to complete numbness. Inside, my father, hearing of my plight, began to plead in a low voice. The king's voice, lazy and sated, told him to say something nice. Then, I heard my father, In a trembling, humiliated tone I had never heard before, speak words of hollow affection, begging for the king's favor. I was finally allowed to rise after nightfall. The pain in my legs was so intense I nearly collapsed. Alexander was waiting for me at the entrance to the east wing. He didn't ask any questions. He simply turned his back and crouched down. "Get on." I hesitated. He said I was the first person he had ever offered to carry, that I should consider myself fortunate. His tone was still laced with mockery, but I was drowning in such a tidal wave of self-loathing that I didn't care. On his back, I began to struggle restlessly. "Be still. I don't like it." His voice turned sharp. "You need to learn to listen." I refused, fighting against him more fiercely. Alexander was not one to tolerate defiance. As we passed a shallow ornamental pond, glazed with a thin layer of ice, he walked directly into it without a moment's hesitation. The icy water shocked the air from my lungs. I couldn't swim. In my panic, I instinctively clung to him, wrapping my arms and legs around his warm body as tightly as I could. "See? Now you're behaving," he whispered by my ear, a triumphant smirk in his voice. "I have all the patience in the world to teach you." He carried my drenched and shivering body back to his rooms, wrapped me in thick furs, and for the rest of the night, I was a soulless doll, unresponsive to his touch. As he had predicted, I learned to be Guy. A few days later, I tried to see my father again, and again the king was there. I hid, peering through a crack in the door. The king was demanding to know why Elias wouldn't look at him. A servant quietly told me that my father had refused to look at the king for days, even blindfolding himself with a silk scarf. It seemed that after years of degradation, this one useless act of defiance was all the pride he had left. He preferred darkness to the sight of the man who had destroyed his life. This continued until the king said that if he did not remove the blindfold, he would have my head delivered to his feet. The silk scarf was ripped away. Elias looked at the king, his eyes vacant, but his voice was perfectly modulated to convey admiration. He spoke of how the king's radiance had only grown in his absence, how his heart was full of devotion. The king was pleased. My head, for the time being, remained on my shoulders. Once I finally saw my father at his most broken. He was lying face down amidst a tangle of satin sheets, his breathing shallow. His back was a ruin of old scars and fresh welts. When he saw it was me, he made no effort to cover himself. He simply closed his eyes, his voice a weary whisper. "Julian, help me with some ointment." "Yes," I said. I took the jar of salve and carefully untied the silk cords from his wrists, gathering his long hair away from his neck. He trembled under my touch, fragile as antique porcelain. He had been raised with such care, so cherished by his family. He had never known such hardship. He took a slow breath and asked in a hoarse voice how my mother was. I told him she was alive. My mother, Eleanor, was kept in the deepest part of Blackwater prison. The king wouldn't let her die, keeping her alive with the best medicine only to prolong her suffering. My father urged me to visit her often. I carefully applied the cooling balm to his wounds and helped him into a soft nightshirt. Then, just as he used to do for me when I was a child, I cradled his head and gently patted his back. He fell asleep in my arms like a weary child. After he was asleep, I walked towards the grim fortress of Blackwater in the northwest corner of the palace grounds. A heavy snow was falling, dusting the red stone walls. In a dim cell, my mother was leaning against the cold wall. At the sound of my footsteps, she looked up, her unfocused eyes finding me. A faint smile touched her lips. Looking at her, I thought of my father's scarred back in the rosewood wing. I hadn't told her about his situation, But somehow, she already knew. She asked me, her eyes wide, if it was true that my father was in the king's bed. My heart sank. I told her not to blame him, that he did it to save us. She burst out laughing, a harsh, grating sound. She said she didn't blame him at all. She was delighted. I tried to explain that he was suffering, but she cut me off with a sneer, rattling the chains bolted through her ankles, asking if I thought her own situation was any better. She beckoned me closer. "Julian," she whispered in my ear, "this is our chance. Tell your father to kill the damned king." I told her he didn't have the strength or the will. She sighed, calling him weak. I relayed my father's only wish, for us to live quietly. "And you?" she asked, her eyes boring into me. "What about you in the East Wing? Do you have a chance to get close to the prince?" I nodded, telling her the prince kept me near. Her eyes lit up with a feral glow, like a starving wolf in the night. "If I can't kill the father, we'll kill the son. Julian, my son, you must kill the prince." I tried to make her see reason, that killing the prince would mean death for both me and my father. "Avenging me is your purpose in life," she hissed, her grip on my wrist tightening, her nails digging into my flesh. "The king killed my entire family. He is your enemy too." Her eyes burned with a fire I had never seen before. "Remember," she commanded, her voice rising to a frantic pitch, "revenge. Have your father kill the king. You kill his son." I stumbled backward, away from her madness. I kept her words to myself for weeks, but eventually, I told my father what she had said. He had grown gaunt, a shadow of his former self. He lay on the edge of the royal bed, the air thick with cloying incense. He told me not to seek revenge, not to become like my mother. "Appease them," he whispered, his voice as faint as the wind. "Survive. The king said when you are older, he will let you go." I nodded, a lump forming in my throat. He reached out a frail hand to touch my face. "Your eyes," he murmured, "they look so much like mine did at your age." He didn't finish his thought. The king arrived, pushing me aside to gather Elias into his arms like a precious doll. I averted my gaze, unable to look at the expression on my father's face. Elias did not live to see me grow older. He didn't survive the winter. He died on the coldest day of the year, as a heavy snow blanketed the palace. The king held his body and wept with a terrifying, mad grief. I stood outside the chamber, watching as my father's frail form was wrapped in a fine brocade quilt, a final, hollow gesture of honor. I didn't cry. Alexander stood beside me. "Julian," he said, "remember this. The only person you are allowed to cry for is me." Whenever I felt tears coming, his hand would find the back of my neck and pinch the flesh, a sharp, distracting pain. When I brought the news of my father's death to my mother, her reaction will haunt me for the rest of my life. "Avenge your father, my son," she said, cupping my face in her hands. There were no tears in her eyes, only a burning, all-consuming hatred. "Kill the king." I told her I had no way of even getting close to him. "No," she said, a strange smile twisting her lips. "You do. The king is sick with longing for your father. And you, my son, you look so much like him." A chill ran down my spine. I knew she was right. The king's gaze did indeed fall upon me. On a sweltering afternoon, he summoned me to his chambers. He made me put on one of my father's old formal suits. "Turn around," he commanded from the throne, his eyes hazy, as if he were looking through me at someone else. "Let me see." I turned stiffly, the wide sleeves of the suit stirring the air. It still carried the faint, scholarly scent of ink that had always clung to my father. So alike, he murmured, beckoning me closer. He gave me a meaningless title and ordered me to emulate my father's mannerisms, his way of walking, of speaking. That night, I was to attend to him. As dusk fell, I walked into the royal bedchamber, the air thick with the scent of sandalwood. "Come here," the king said, his eyes filled with a feverish obsession. His fingers were about to touch my cheek when the doors to the chamber burst open. Alexander stood there, sword in hand, his armor spattered with blood. Behind him stood a phalanx of loyal soldiers. "Traitorous son," the king roared, scrambling to his feet. "This is treason." "On the contrary, father," Alexander's voice was laced with a chilling amusement. "I've come to reunite you with your beloved." The point of his sword found the king's heart with practiced ease. As the king's body collapsed, my legs gave out from under me. A powerful arm snaked around my waist, pulling me back against a searingly hot chest. Alexander's lips were at my ear, his breath hot on my neck. He laughed, a low, guttural sound of triumph. His hand held me with inescapable force, like a hunter holding his prize. Now, he whispered, "You are mine." He threw me onto the massive bed. The cloying scent of sandalwood mingled with the fresh, coppery smell of blood. His kisses were not gentle. They were an assault, a conquest. The sound of tearing fabric was the sound of my last shred of dignity being ripped away. I bit my lip until it bled, the sharp pain a distant anchor in a sea of violation. It occurred to me then, in a haze of agony, that the father and son shared the exact same appetites. Late that night, as Alexander slept, I ignored the screaming pain in my body and felt for the signet ring he had tossed carelessly onto the nightstand. I closed my fist around it. With the stolen ring, I made my way to the dungeons and freed my mother. As we fled the palace gates, she asked me what had happened. I was vague, omitting the humiliating details, but her eyes, sharpened by years of intrigue, saw everything. A king's signet ring does not simply appear in one's hand. "You climbed into his bed," she stated, her voice like ice. The words struck me with the force of a physical blow. I remained silent. "Give me a knife," she said suddenly. Shaking with shame, I handed her a small blade I carried, expecting, almost hoping, she would end my pathetic life. Instead, she turned the blade on herself. "Alexander did this to me," she gasped, as blood bloomed at her throat. She looked back toward the palace, her last breath a ragged scream. "My son, avenge me!" I knelt in the snow, holding her cooling body, and finally understood. In my mother's heart, vengeance had always been worth more than my life. With Alexander's ascension, the kingdom was unstable. His uncle, the third prince, launched a rebellion. I joined his army, seeking my own revenge in the chaos. I trained, my body growing stronger, but my heart remained a hollow, empty space. The shadow of Alexander loomed over me, making me recoil from any human contact, the memory of sandalwood and violation ever present. I was a ghost, animated only by the need for revenge. But Alexander and his father, for all their personal cruelty, were not incompetent rulers. The rebellion was swiftly crushed. I thought I would die on the battlefield, but I was captured, blindfolded, and taken back to the one place I most wanted to escape. "Little Julian, 2 years and you've grown up." The familiar voice, the familiar scent, enveloped me. Alexander's fingers traced the freshly inked letter T, for traitor, on my cheek. The wound was still raw, and his touch sent sharp jolts of pain through me. He ripped the blindfold off. I looked up at him. He was the king now, dressed in a simple but elegant robe embroidered with white peacocks. Only his eyes were the same, cold as a frozen lake, even when he smiled. He forced my head up, not allowing me to look away. He had a servant bring a pot of red ink and a fine needle. With his own hands, he tattooed an elaborate, elegant phoenix tail over the crude brand, forever marking my rebellion as his possession. "Look," he said, holding up a bronze mirror. I squeezed my eyes shut, tears mixed with blood and ink on my cheek. "Do you want me to blind you?" he threatened. I forced my eyes open and stared at the reflection of the boy he had remade in his image. He sighed and wiped the tears from my face. "I am not my father," he said, his voice deceptively gentle. "I know how to be good to the one I love. Haven't I been good to you?" "Yes, your majesty has been so very good to me." I laughed, a broken, manic sound. The hatred boiled in my chest. I hated that I had failed my mother. He was a king now, untouchable. I still wanted to try to die fighting. But then he brought in a baby. "Your sister," he said, a playful smile on his face. "Born in prison after your mother was captured." His fingers lightly stroked the infant's fragile neck. "If you don't believe me, I can snap her neck right now." I looked at that innocent life. Even if she wasn't my sister, I couldn't let her die because of me. The last dregs of my resistance drained away. "No," I whispered. "Good." Alexander smiled, satisfied. His thumb stroked the phoenix tail on my cheek. "From now on, every time you defy me, she will suffer." Outside the window, it began to snow again, just as it had on the day my father died. I was kept in the palace, a prized bird in a golden cage. The storm I had anticipated did not immediately break. Alexander treated me with a strange, almost unsettling tenderness. He gave me a title, curator of the royal aviary, a quiet, pointless job tending to the peacocks. The aviary was peaceful, filled with the graceful white birds. Alexander would often come and watch me in silence, but he felt no affection for the birds. One evening, I instinctively took a half-step back as he approached. His eyes went cold. With a flick of his wrist, a guard stepped forward and cleanly broke a peacock's neck. He looked at me, his voice flat. "Next time, it won't be just one." "Yes, your majesty," I murmured, lowering my eyes. He also developed a strange fondness for the swings in the royal gardens. I never understood why a man of his depth and cruelty would be so taken with such a childish pastime. Sometimes he would have me sit on the swing, and he would push me higher and higher, so high I could almost see over the palace walls. The wind roared in my ears, and for a moment, the weightless feeling could make me forget the hate and the pain. Other times, he would sit on the swing and I would push him. Once, at the apex of an arc, his voice cut through the wind. "Julian, sometimes I wish I could grow wings and fly us both out of this place." I said nothing. He was the king. He could never fly away. This palace was his battlefield and his prison, and he was determined to keep me locked in it with him. His chief eunuch once told me quietly that His Majesty was most at peace when he was with me. I scoffed internally. Peace? He treated me no differently than he treated one of his beautiful pets. But I was not a pet. The brand of my mother's dying wish was seared onto my soul. Finally, one night as he slept beside me, the hatred became a wildfire. I reached out, my hands moving toward his throat, intending to choke the life from him. I had underestimated him. He had grown up steeped in conspiracy. Vigilance was etched into his bones. The moment my fingertips brushed his skin, his dark eyes snapped open, perfectly clear and alert. He grabbed my wrist, twisting it behind my back with excruciating force. He flipped me onto my stomach, pinning me down. His fingers slowly traced the phoenix tail on my cheek. So feisty, he chuckled, a note of cruel amusement in his voice. Fine. You want to fight? Let's fight. He released me and retrieved a jewel-encrusted dagger from a hidden compartment in a nearby table. He tossed it to me. Here, kill me. You mean it? My voice was a dry rasp. I mean it, he said, sitting up. His night robe fell open, revealing his lean, muscular chest. His eyes were sharp, predatory. He told me that if I failed to kill him, I would submit to him completely for the rest of the night. He raised a hand, silencing the guards who had heard the commotion outside. In the sudden, dead quiet, my courage evaporated. Can't, I whispered. He picked up the dagger and forced the hilt into my hand, closing his own hand over mine. He guided the ice-cold blade until its point rested against his heart. Coward, he hissed. Right here. One clean thrust. My hand trembled violently, but his was steady as rock, pressing my fingers against the hilt. Do it, he commanded. I stared at his chest so close. Kill him and it would all be over. My parents would be avenged. I would be free. But my arm felt like it was encased in lead. I couldn't push. I thought of the infant girl, his hostage. What would happen to her? The dagger clattered to the floor. Alexander smiled. I knew you didn't have it in you. He cupped my face, his thumb stroking the phoenix tattoo. His tone was almost affectionate, but his eyes were filled with the thrill of absolute control. You've had your fun. Now it's my turn. Wouldn't you agree? I closed my eyes in resignation. A bet was a bet. Be good, he rasped, his breath hot against my skin. Arms out, legs up. The familiar scent of sandalwood enveloped me like a shroud. Hate me if you want. His lips brushed my neck, his voice a hot whisper. At least then your heart will always be full of me. Alexander took a queen, the daughter of an important minister. She was dignified and virtuous, a perfect mother for the nation. And I became the sole man living within the inner palace, an awkward, scandalous presence. To his CR, he was more lenient than his father had been with mine. I was even allowed to walk freely through the palace grounds. This freedom, I vowed, would become the weapon I used against him. I began to visit the queen frequently. She was an intelligent woman and knew the sordid history between me and the king. She tried to avoid me, but I persisted, testing the limits of her tolerance and provoking Alexander's patience. It eventually worked. One afternoon in the queen's chambers, I insisted on pouring her tea. As she tried to refuse, her fingers brushed against my wrist. At that exact moment, Alexander walked in. I feigned shock and dropped the teapot. It shattered, splashing hot tea and sharp porcelain fragments across the floor. Someone clean this up, the queen called out. No need, Alexander said, his eyes like chips of ice fixed on me. Let him do it himself. I knelt and began picking up the sharp pieces with my bare hands. A shard sliced my fingertip, and a bead of blood welled up, mixing with the tea. He walked over, placed the sole of his boot on my hand, and ground it into the floor. The porcelain bit deeper into my flesh. The pain was sharp and blinding. Does it hurt? He asked, his voice calm. Beg me. I lowered my head until my forehead touched the cold, wet floor. Please, your majesty, I trembled. Forgive me. After a long moment, he bent down, grabbed the front of my shirt, and hauled me to my feet, pulling me into a fierce embrace. He looked at the pale-faced queen and said coolly, My apologies, your highness. I'm taking my property with me. The queen stood frozen, a bitter smile on her lips. She was his property too, no different from the ornate furniture in her own rooms. Back in his chambers, he took my bleeding hand and put my fingers in his mouth, sucking at the wound before biting down hard. A fresh wave of pain made me gasp. "You wanted to make me jealous," he stated, staring into my eyes. I looked away. "There's nothing you won't dare, is there?" He sneered. The punishment that followed was unspoken but inevitable. I suppose I was daring. His royal body was covered in my teeth marks. Half a month later, word spread that the queen was pregnant. The chief eunuch informed us as Alexander and I were watching the few remaining peacocks. The king's expression didn't change. He merely acknowledged the news. But a venomous thought took root in my mind. Perhaps it was years of resentment or a twisted jealousy. Why should his child be born into legitimacy while my very existence was a disgrace? I spoke before I could stop myself, my voice light and malicious. "It might not be yours, could be mine." The moment the words were out, I was shocked at myself. The queen was innocent. But my hatred for Alexander was so vast it had spilled over onto his unborn child. If I couldn't kill him, I could destroy what he cared about. He turned his head slowly. Half his face was illuminated, smiling. The other half was in shadow, terrifyingly cold. I had underestimated his madness and my own unique position in it. "Julian," he said, his voice unervingly calm, "you belong to me. Therefore, your child would be my child." An unexpected wave of relief washed over me, and I started to laugh. He didn't care about the queen or even his own bloodline. He only cared about his possession of me. "What's so funny?" he asked. "I'm laughing at how deeply you must love me," I replied, my tone a complex mix of sincerity and scorn. He looked at me as if I were an idiot. After a long pause, he said, "You fool. If I didn't care for you, you would have been dead the first time you defied me." I lowered my head, hiding the storm of emotions in my eyes. "Thank you for your favor, your majesty. You're all I have," he said with stark sincerity. For a moment I thought that I, too, had no one but him. If I killed him, the resulting loneliness would probably kill me. I began to wonder if I had been too harsh on him. Perhaps he hadn't done anything truly unforgivable. That evening, he held my hand as we walked back to the palace, our shadows stretching and merging in the sunset. In that moment, shamefully, I let go of my hatred. Maybe this was it. A life entangled with his. Maybe that was acceptable. That night I was pliant, even responsive. At the height of passion, I clung to his shoulders and whispered in his ear, "Alexander, you have to die before I do. Let my hands be the last thing on your throat." He stilled, then gave a low chuckle. "Want to feel the thrill of regicide?" "I'm serious," I said. "I need something to tell my parents in the afterlife. And what do I get in return?" He murmured, his breath hot. "I'll follow you in death," I answered without hesitation. He pushed me down, his eyes gleaming with a mad possessiveness in the dark. "Don't worry," he vowed. "I will never leave you behind, not even in death." When spring came, he brought me a branch of blooming cherry blossoms. "Shall I give you another tattoo? A cherry blossom?" Suddenly, the years of hatred felt worn down, eroded by time. For the first time, I submitted willingly. "Whatever pleases your majesty." He smiled, a rare, boyish expression. He tilted my chin up. "No, not on your face. It's too small." I blinked. A wicked grin spread across his face as he leaned in and whispered in my ear, "Every part of you belongs to me, so I'll put it." My face flushed a deep crimson.